Good morning, this is Samuel, and in today's video I'm going to be discussing boundaries. Additionally, I do have an exciting update. I now have a better microphone. So I am doing some testing with it, so please let me know your thoughts. If you like the new audio quality, if I should go back to borrowing the headset, whatever you prefer, drop it down in the comments below. So I did say I'd be getting a microphone once I got to 10 subscribers. We are now up to 27 as of recording. So thank you all for subscribing and listening. If you find yourself enjoying this content and you want to see me continue to develop this channel, please do like, subscribe, comment down below your thoughts, any questions you may have. Additionally, I am out of coffee. So, down in the description below, there will be a link to Resupply. I really enjoy the coffee that this company produces. And the founder is now doing quite a bit of charity work, and he's really getting out there and expanding the business, so it's awesome to see. It is a veteran-owned business. However, since I'm out of coffee, I will be drinking an energy drink throughout the duration of this recording. So, my apologies, but bear with me. I need caffeine. Okay, so boundaries. In a previous video, I believe it was ENTJ relationships, I had discussed how I viewed, and I think many people with a cognitive function of ENTJ tend to view the world as a battlefield. And what I mean by that is, so that which is me, my personality, my psyche, and makeup, etc., can be basically hurt or impacted by different things. I'm relatively okay with the idea of physical violence and confrontation. I'm okay with mental confrontation and challenging via debate or an intellectual argument. I'm okay with that. When it comes down to an emotional argument, or when it comes down to being impacted emotionally and taking emotional damage. Love that meme. When it comes to taking emotional damage, one, I don't receive that damage well. It's very debilitating when it does happen, and it's not something that I'll recover from easily. So most of what I'm going to be discussing will refer to emotional boundaries. You can apply some of this mentally as well as physically. Do what you need to do to suit your own needs. Now, around that part of me which is more, let's say for lack of a better word, vulnerable, there are a series of obstacles that I will set up and construct between me and other individuals. The three big ones for this that I want you to remember, or kind of mental models to use, are, first off, lines of passage. So imagine that around you, you have different concentric rings, and people that you know and don't know can occupy a different ring, closer to farther away from you. And for the purpose of this, especially for your mental health, listener, this is something that I've had to learn. Just because there is some external factor of relationship between you and this individual should not necessarily constitute a reason to place them automatically somewhere different in your lines of passage. What I mean by that is, many people who are struggling in life, in my estimation, should take a good strong look at their family, those people who are consistently in their lives, and in my estimation, they should be adjusting that relationship. Maybe having them at a further line of passage, at a little bit more distance than someone else. So just because you have a relationship, you're related to them biologically, or you've known them for forever, once you're done with this video, take a bit, write it out if you need to on a piece of paper. What kind of relationship? Please don't mind the ambulance driving by. Someone probably had a heart attack or something. I hope they're doing well. So maybe take a bit of time to write out the various individuals that you typically interact with and try and decide what type of relationship you want to have with them. What distance, what I mean, should you have with them, specifically emotionally. Now, you're going to have these different lines of passage, and various people going in and out of your life are going to effectively try to advance on your position. They're going to try to become closer to you. And there could be different reasons behind this. They could legitimately mean well, but perhaps this is someone who just really grinds your gears, or for whatever reason, they mean well, but that relationship is not a healthy one. So maybe you need to keep them at a little bit more distance. Conversely, than they would like, you may need to keep people at a further distance than what they would like, and they may legitimately mean well. It's okay. These are your boundaries. Enforce them. Additionally, you may have people who will come into your life, and you may want to have a higher level of relationship with them. They may be cool with that. They may not. So conversely, remember, these people are going to have their own lines of passage. A big part of giving people higher levels of what I call security clearance, meaning they're more privy to information about what is going on with you, mentally, emotionally, the news and stuff in your life. Having those discussions, those late night discussions in which you talk about the dark and ugly garbage that keeps you awake at night. Or maybe some trauma from your past. You don't want to hand that information out willy-nilly, in my estimation. So, you're both going to play what I call trust catch. Effectively, you're going to exchange information back and forth over time to see if each other is trustworthy. As you let this person in further and further into your lines of passage, you give them a higher level of security clearance. Keep an eye on the situation and see if they're just gaining information on you, and if you don't really know anything about this person, that's a red flag. Watch out. Start to be a little bit more careful in that situation. Now, if you want more information on that, I recommend checking out my video, Building the Inner Circle. This is especially important in my estimation for ENTJs. Now then, those other people who are going to either, one, try and subversively enter through your lines of passage with the intent of doing you harm, or those people who will overtly try to enter your lines of passage to do you harm. And what I mean by that is basically this. People who want to, for one reason or another, do you harm will either pretend to be your friend to gain critical information about you, your sources of trauma, the way you think, your patterns, behaviors, whatever it may be. Some of them will try to be your friend to gain this information to do you harm. I think it's tricky for me to sort out those people who mean well, but will accidentally do me harm, or will then, at a point of convenience, use information that I granted them to my detriment and their benefit, but they supposedly mean well, as opposed to those people who just flat out wish you harm. For myself, I put both these people in the same box. I don't deal with them. I will stonewall them and shut them down. We'll get into that in a bit. Then you have various people who will overtly, in a slightly more clumsy attempt, they will insult you, belittle you, backstab you, even though they don't know in-depth information about you per se yet. They'll still try to do this type of thing. The latter category I don't have much trouble dealing with, because they'll often, it's easy to see them coming from a mile away, for one, so you can prepare yourself, and second, at least for myself, unless you really get to know me and I share more in-depth stuff about myself, and I, in the course of trying to build a relationship with you, expose myself in some fashion, the average individual can't do too much to me, emotionally speaking. One, because I don't give anything away easily. Second, in order to counter these types of attacks, I want you to use another two concepts for your mental model. The first is barbed wire. Now, toward any individual who may be attempting to do you ill, having that cold and prickly immediate reaction and point of confrontation. So they try to mess with you, to test your boundaries, to shake you a bit, just immediately shutting them down, being cold and prickly. And you don't need to be extremely rude or nasty with them to achieve this. Just being very deadpan, maybe a little bit mean if they keep it up. So the more that they try to encroach upon your boundaries and disrespect you in that fashion, the more you can turn that dial, if need be. Next, what I want you to think about is the idea of a trench or a wall. Maybe both, like a wall with a trench behind it. So if someone manages to try and push into your barbed wire and turning up the dial on them and being a little bit meaner, a little bit more cold, just isn't working, effectively just having that solid barrier between you and them and not giving them an inch of ground further. What I mean by that in a practical sense is that, so let's say someone is a colleague at work, and periodically they try to make barbs, they try to make fun of you. Just realizing for a moment that they don't have anything on you that actually matters to you, and then just blatantly not giving a damn. It'll take some discipline and time to achieve this, and I don't know if it'll work for everyone, but I find this to be very effective. For myself, at the very least. Now, if you have an individual who, through some means, has managed to advance further into your lines of passage, if it's necessary, by all means, be a little bit mean, a little bit nasty, maybe vindictive. What I want you to incorporate is the idea that you are able and willing to be vicious and to rip out the other party's throats. Occasionally do it. Don't do it too often, because that won't be conducive toward building new relationships. But if someone really crosses the line, go ahead and rip their throat out, metaphorically speaking. If they physically cross the line with you, do as you will, and ensure that you are compliant, legally speaking. Do what you need to do. For those of you who may be more empathetic than I am, what I want you to remember is that if they're doing this to you, this other party clearly doesn't give a damn about you, and they may wish you legitimate harm, or they just want to take advantage of you, and they don't care about what that does to you. They have more than earned being shown that you have teeth. Make sure that you have teeth to use. So in that line of thinking, I want to bring up the mental model of MAD, mutually assured destruction. So as an individual, with your permission, gains a higher level of security clearance, you should be building you should both have the capability to do potential harm to the other. That way, if things turn sour down the road, you both have a very good reason to not initiate any type of conflict. And if they do, well, then you're both in for a world of hurt. And make yourself comfortable with the idea of doing that if need be. On the last note, I had to pause the video right there just to think about if I wanted to touch on this, and I most certainly will. And that gets down to physical boundaries. What I mean by this is that we all have a different level and different boundaries that we have with our physical persons. There's your extended environment. Some individuals choose to live in very isolated places with no one around for miles. I'm somewhat partial to this myself, but achieving my goals requires social interaction at a scale that otherwise I wouldn't normally care for. So these people, they have a very attuned sense of their extended environment. And then you have your personal bubble. Now, different people have slightly different sized personal bubbles. And what I mean by a personal bubble is how close you're willing to get with someone that you don't know very well. So, for example, if you hate being crammed into a bus with a bunch of other people, whenever you're doing that, your personal bubble is being more or less compromised. Now, if someone chooses to outwardly violate your personal bubble, meaning some random stranger comes up and touches you in a way that they have no business doing, and may very well be inappropriate. Additionally, even with associates or acquaintances, typically, at least for myself, my rule of thumb is arms. So basically, like, elbow down is the highest amount of physical contact. So doing a quick handshake, fist bump, the handshake thing, maybe touch the elbow lightly if you want to build more rapport and you're joking, or is perhaps a display of dominance, even, which I don't take that very kindly myself, but to other people, they'll do as they will. Now, if this same individual suddenly starts to touch me on the shoulder, I will start to defend that boundary both by physical cues as well as verbally. So, you can do this with any type of boundary set, and I refer to it with the barbed wire by turning up the dial. But effectively, if you want to defend your boundary, it requires the willingness to escalate your response to their action. So if someone starts to get a little bit handsy, or they start to stand too close, just outwardly saying like, whoa, buddy, dude, okay, look, a little too close for comfort. I can smell your breath right now. 6 feet distance. I know we're not too worried about the coronavirus as of time of recording, but personally, I really came to like not having people stand 2 feet behind me all the time. So, being willing and able to verbally defend your personal bubble at the outset is going to deter a lot of people from becoming more comfortable invading your personal space later on down the line. In the event that someone touches you in a very inappropriate way, either assault or sexual assault, my personal recommendation is, if possible, immediate retaliation. Either verbally make a scene, just go ahead and make a scene. You're in legitimate danger if they're doing this. Make them embarrassed. Make them look like jackasses. Do what you have to do, okay? If you're not able to do that, or if that what they did is repetitive or serious enough, I recommend using some type of a force multiplier to physically defend yourself and your physical boundaries. What I mean by a force multiplier is, so for myself, I'm fairly confident in a one-on-one confrontation, using like a base knowledge of martial arts. So having some type of a disciplined fighting style, there's a force multiplier. You now have one up over someone who is of approximate body strength, size to you, and who has a lesser amount of training. Now, we can't always control for this, so another force multiplier may be a taser, mace, brass knuckles, a blade, a firearm, whatever. Of course, be compliant legally speaking. However, I definitely recommend having something akin to this on your person, or becoming very familiar with common objects that you could use in this type of fashion, something that you will often have on hand. In my estimation, especially if I have any, let's say, females or individuals of a more timid disposition, like you're listening to this to try and develop your boundaries, or if you're of smaller stature, I'm a fairly, like, moderately fit guy myself, but I am kind of lanky and look skinny at a distance. Having a force multiplier, whatever it may be, 9 times out of 10, if you can afford it and legally acquire it, I recommend a firearm. Look, lots of people are both physically and psychologically abused. Their boundaries are violated and they are abused every day. Almost all interactions in which the victim had some type of firearm on their person are quickly resolved. Of course, become familiar with using whatever tool, and that's what it is, it's a tool that you may elect to carry on your person or in your vehicle, whether it's mace, a taser, or yes, a firearm. Practice with it. Know how to use it. Make sure that you can use it without it being taken away from you. Or if you are going to use something like that, make sure you can use it safely, both for yourself and other people. So that kind of I'll go ahead and bring this to an end on that point. If you have any questions, either on the emotional boundaries side of thing, or yes, even the physical boundary side of thing, and how to better guarantee your psychological and physical boundaries, well-being. I wouldn't say safety necessarily, but yes, even safety may apply. Go ahead and drop it down in the comments below. I would love to discuss that kind of thing. And if I can help out in some fashion, I'll give my advice. Granted, this is just my advice. If you have a serious situation, I recommend consulting with some type of professional on this point. And bringing this all to an end, as of time of recording, the stock market has been plunging for quite a while. I certainly am starting to average back into the markets after completely withdrawing just prior to the COVID pandemic. With the all-time lows at this point in time, I'm starting to buy back into the markets, working up a dividend investing strategy. And after the fiasco with a certain brokerage, Robinhood, withholding and restricting trades, I switched over to WeBull, and I'm very happy to be using them. I'll drop down a promotional link in the description below. Upon depositing your first $100, you and I will both have the chance to win up to 10 free stocks. So, go ahead and give it a try. And beyond that, keep on keeping on.